All right, you're listening to Hysteria, the podcast for people who understand that George Santos absolutely should not be in Congress, but still will kind of miss the sparkling of that crazy diamond when he does leave. He's grown on me.
Erin, we all need a cartoon in Congress, and he's the gift that keeps giving.
I love that it is out there. I love that his ridiculousness is on his sleeve and it's out there and it's face. Entertaining. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I would say though, that I think it'll be good that when he's gone, because a lot of the really bad stuff that people in Congress do, like trading stocks, obviously on information that they shouldn't be trading stocks on, that's boring. It's like more boring than buying OnlyFans and Botox with campaign money, you know?
Ferragamo.
So, yeah. I mean, like Botox and OnlyFans, should you be doing it? No, that's bad. You should not be doing that. But there are worse things that other people are doing. And maybe when George Santos's big loud show is gone, we can start focusing on the boring but more serious crimes of people in Congress.
Mean, he learned from the best, right? He and Donald Trump. I mean, Trump has like loads of very serious crimes, but also grifters of an utterly different level, using constituent money for like crimes and Botox.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost impressive at this point. You know, the level of lying and the brazenness and the boldness. I would say that he's like a disruptor of the truth in Silicon Valley talk.
He is too outrageous to be a viable character on 90 Day Fiancé.
Honestly, if he were on 90 Day Fiancé, that would maybe bring me back to the show. The show has gotten
too
to
much.
Be like it's become self-aware to the point where I feel like I'm watching people performing being on 90 Day Fiancé rather than just watching people's lives.
George Santos bringing his true authentic self to TLC.
Authentic self. Isn't authenticity the Merriam-Webster word of the year?
It is. Though some felt it should have been Ozempic.
I mean, it's only a matter of time before a rapper rhymes Ozempic and authentic in a song.
We just did the work for them.
It's a free rhyme. I can't rap. I'm not even going to try. Someone wants it, they could just have it. One final question about Santos.
Yeah.
I don't want him to leave Washington. I'm just going to say. I think he's such a chaos muppet that
he's a chaos muppet, and he's also like a unifying force. What else has brought Democrats and Republicans together other than their disdain for George Santos?
Yeah. And that's kind of funny. I want him to get a podcast, like one of those messy gossip podcasts. When you listen to it, you're like, are you going to get sued for saying this stuff?
You mean all the anonymous ones?
Yeah.
That
I
are
want him to be
spotted.
like a Demois type podcast, but about Capitol Hill, where he just like makes wild implications about his former colleagues in Congress, and we all like make wildly irresponsible speculation around what people are doing.
I'd like to have him do that exact podcast in Anna Delvey voice, where he just says, "It's so basic."
Yeah. So anyway, we don't need any more podcasts except that one. That is the one new podcast that I think is necessary and needed, is George Santos hosting a DC gossip podcast. Make it happen. Make it so.
But then you and I could make a scripted TV show about said podcast.
Oh, man. What is media right now? Okay. I want to talk about a story that you and I were talking about this over text this week. And I think it provides some really good context to help people understand why we're seeing a certain type of story in the news so much. So I think I want to say a week ago, there was a bombshell, horrifying lawsuit against P. Diddy filed in New York, alleging years and years of horrific abuse by an ex-girlfriend alleged this against P. Diddy. And then shortly thereafter, a lawsuit was filed against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, alleging that he had committed sexual assault when he was a member of the police force in 1993. There are a bunch of lawsuits being filed. Russell Brand, there's a lawsuit. There's been lawsuits filed against Donald Trump. But there's a reason for this. And Alyssa, I would love for you to kind of explain to our listeners why we're seeing all of these lawsuits and what's going on in other places that might enable similar lawsuits to be filed.
Well, Erin, a lot of people, and I think this is kind of why you and I wanted to talk about it, a lot of people don't know that this happened back in 2019 and is ongoing, and in many states where survivors and victims of sexual abuse actually have a chance to get some justice. So first, in 2019, New York State increased the statute of limitations from 1 year to 20 years for civil and criminal sex crimes cases. Then in May 2022, the Adult Survivors Act passed, which lets victims who are over 18 at the time of abuse one chance to file lawsuits despite the statute of limitations running out. In addition to that, New York State went even further and followed the Adult Survivors Act with the Child Victims Act, which included a 1-year look-back window during which old childhood sex abuse claims whose statute of limitations had expired and could be revived. So, Erin, under these laws that New York State passed, one of which expired right before Thanksgiving, which is why we saw this flurry of cases. I mean, Erin, thousands of cases were filed. The number of cases filed in the state Supreme Court alone rose from 803 at the end of October to almost 1,400 just last week. So women are out there and they are learning about this. And the thing is, so many people didn't know, and this is actually also happening in other states. But one thing that was appalling and should be flagged is that 479 cases alone here in New York were against corrections officers in the prison system, specifically Rikers. So that's really bad and seems like something the state should look into. But other states, Erin, that we get, Arizona, California, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, New Jersey, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and Minnesota all have look-back sexual assault laws. And other states have windows that they opened that are still open right now, which include Colorado, Arkansas, Louisiana, Maine, Nevada, and Vermont. So this is great news, something that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage, but victims should know about because they deserve their moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's really stunning to know that before 2019, before New York State did this, that people only had a year.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
People only had a year to file civil cases regarding sexual misconduct. That is pretty crazy. I'm glad that this exists. It seems like I'm worried and I wonder how this is impacting courts, because not to say that these laws shouldn't exist because it clogs up the courts, but I'm wondering, what's the backlog look like? How are states handling that?
Do you know what's interesting that I did not know as I was poking around? Do you know that Manhattan civil courts or criminal courts rather, that Manhattan criminal courts are open till 1 a.m. most nights?
What? That's
Isn't
crazy.
That crazy? I know.
I'm never up that late.
How much work public defenders have to do.
Ugh. Mm-hmm. That's pretty wild. That is pretty wild. So, Alyssa, now that first wave, that 1 year window closed in New York, is there talk of opening a window again? Like what's next?
They're talking. So we have the Adult Survivors Act, which helps, and they are talking about reopening the window, but that's not set in stone yet.
Okay. Well, that's super interesting. And I would imagine that there are some organizations that really don't like these laws, namely like religious organizations that now have to deal with, they have to deal with the consequences of their actions, which is a bummer, but
warranted.
Here are some of the other names that have been implicated during this window. Harvey Weinstein, Jamie Foxx, Steven Tyler, Bill Cosby, L.A. Reid, Axl Rose, Mike Tyson, Andrew Cuomo, Rudy Giuliani. So all of these like prominent lawsuits dealing with actions that allegedly happened a long time ago because of these laws. So now you know. Now you know. Oh, yeah. Speaking of one of the subjects of these look back lawsuits, Donald Trump.
That guy.
He's running for president. He's got enough criminal charges to fill a whole Pandora bracelet. If anybody's looking for a gift for the man who has everything, is a charm for each one of his 91.
Charm for each indictment.
Yeah, I think that would be just like a really sweet thing for his extended family to do for him, is to just give him a Pandora bracelet of all of his charges. Trump is running for president, though, and he's still the front runner of the GOP field into 2024. Doesn't look like anything can stop him because not even reality has stopped him from believing and doing whatever he wants for most of his life. He is now trying to run as an abortion moderate.
That's bullshit.
So Donald Trump literally appointed the 3 justices to the Supreme Court who joined the conservative majority in Dobbs that overturned Roe v. Wade. And in recent weeks, according to 2 people familiar with the matter, Donald Trump has Donald Trump has privately remarked that many anti-abortion leaders have now no leverage to force him to do anything anymore. So now, because he's their only choice, like who are the anti-abortion groups going to back? Joe Biden?
Right.
They're not going to back Joe Biden. So they have no leverage to force him to do anything anymore. So now he is saying that he is not going to publicly support a national abortion ban. He's going to run as a moderate and pretend that he is not the person responsible for the mess we're in right now, and that he is the solution to the problems that he caused. Alyssa, what do you make of this?
Erin, okay. Liz Cheney has a book that's coming out, right?
Thank God.
You know why I give her just fucking tons of credit? I don't agree with her on almost anything, but she says what she believes and she kind of sticks to it. And if she changes her mind, she sort of talks it through. No one can believe anything Donald Trump says. There is nothing that he has not backpedaled on or lied about, or I don't know how voters can vote for him because he's literally just a liar. The idea that he would run as a moderate when he is the reason that Roe was overturned. He is a reason that SB 8 exists in Texas. He is a reason there are gynecological deserts throughout the country, why OBGYNs are fleeing certain states. It's because of him. Nobody but him. Nobody but him. Not even Mitch McConnell, this malevolent. It's all because of Trump. And the idea that he's going to stand up and be like, how do you like me now? You can't do anything. I'm like, gum on your shoe, Republican Party. What? He was pro-choice in 1999. He's on Meet the Press being like, I am the most pro-choice. Then he's like, we should criminalize women and send them to jail if they have an abortion, if it's illegal. He is a fucking liar and a very bad man, Erin.
Yeah, it's also interesting that he is running ads in Iowa. According to the New Republic. He's running ads in Iowa where he is calling himself the most pro-life president of all time. So
yeah,
what I think is super interesting about this is that he's trying to, those scenes in TV shows where 2 people will be talking to each other, and then a third person will come up to one of the 2 people that's talking and be like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? They'll step 2 steps away from the original person.
Like the other one can't hear?
And have a conversation that's how Donald Trump thinks politics works. He's sitting here having a conversation with his Iowa people. He's like, listen, I am so pro-life. Look what I did. Look, proof is in the pudding, guys. Look what I did. Look what I did. Oh, wait a second. Oh, hey, hey, voters, I'm going to just talk to you over here for a minute, take 2 steps over and be like, I'm a moderate now. I'm a moderate. I'm not like these other crazy people. I'm a moderate. I think the thing, and I know that we'll get into her in a little bit. But I think that Nikki Haley has much more adeptly maneuvered this than Donald Trump possibly could.
Totally.
And I don't like giving her credit, but I also, have to give her more credit than Donald Trump. I think she's a more skilled, she's better at finessing messages than Donald Trump is. And her moderation on abortion makes a lot more sense and is a lot less of a blatant lie than Donald Trump's. Like, we know that Nikki Haley would support a national abortion ban if she was given the opportunity to. We know that because she said it. She said it in sort of this convoluted way, but we know it because she said it. Donald Trump also is the person responsible for overturning Roe, for appointing the justices that overturned Roe. He's responsible for appointing the justice that tried to instill a national ban on the abortion pill from his perch in fucking Amarillo, Texas. He doesn't have any plausible deniability for the fact that he is not a moderate on abortion. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, doesn't have that track record, and she can go up on the debate stage and say all these kind of soft focus, friendlier,
much friendlier, totally
less confrontational. I think that it's much more believable that Nikki Haley goes up there, because this is a story that she's trying to tell us. Mm-hmm. She's on stage and she's like, look, I've seen how abortion does in elections. The voters clearly don't like the idea of a national abortion ban. We don't have the votes to impose a national abortion ban. So I'm not going to try to strong arm that into happening. Let's be realistic. That's what Nikki Haley's saying. It's like, okay, that follows. That follows. But Donald Trump being like, I made it so abortion could be possibly banned in places like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, etc. And then being like, I'm a moderate is just, you have to have a smooth brain to believe what Donald Trump is saying. Nikki Haley's a little trickier. But
she's trickier. She's trickier. He's pro-life for his life and his life only.
He is pro saying whatever he needs to say to convince just enough people to believe him. He doesn't need everybody to believe him. He just needs a small number of people to believe him. Yeah. And I don't know. Let's talk about Nikki Haley, though. Let's talk about Nikki Haley.
Nikki, girl. She's having a big week.
Nikki's not your friend, folks. Nikki's not your friend. You know why?
Why, Erin?
She's the Koch brothers' friend.
She's not just their friend. She's their number one pick.
She's their number one pick. So why are the Kochs interested in Nikki Haley, Alyssa?
Erin, the Kochs want to get rid of Trump, and they think that Nikki may have the best chance to do it because she's polling, as we've seen. Her polls have done nothing but go up and up and up since the debate started. In a lot of polls where they matched Nikki and other candidates against Biden, she does exceptionally well in some of these polls. And so the Kochs were like, girl, we got you. And really what this is money. There's not much else that they bring to the table. And at this point, it's hard to understand whether the money at this point can make a huge difference. Like for Nikki, she has to come in, she has to do pretty well in Iowa to then like go on to New Hampshire and then hopefully have like her moment in South Carolina. But it's unclear whether she can beat either Trump or DeSantis in Iowa. Iowa caucuses usually mean you need some level of organization, and most reports indicate that she does not have much of a ground game in Iowa right now. So, who knows? But she must feel pretty good about the memes were other level on Instagram yesterday. Nikki getting the Koch endorsement.
Yeah, the thing about Nikki Haley is I think that the Koch brothers, I'm going to say a controversial statement here. I think they're out of touch. I don't think I don't think they really have a handle on the way that voters, specifically Republican Party voters, use and discard women in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Like Republicans need women. And I'm not saying this doesn't happen in other parties as well, but I see this happening more dramatically in the Republican Party. And it is that they use women as sort of smoke screens against accusations of misogyny. Like, how could we be misogynist? We got like 2 bitches right here.
We have a woman.
Yeah, we got a woman. How could we possibly be misogynist?
And they're like, wait, have you seen Elise Stefanik too? We have 2 women.
They got 2 women. Some of their best moms are women. They use them as smoke screens and then discard them before they actually have a chance to achieve any real power. Because it always comes down to like, man, they can't put their finger on why, but they just don't like them. You know, oh, we can't quite she doesn't quite give me the impression that she's a leader, blah, 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 blah. And like I said, we see this in other parties as well. But the Republican Party, I think if Republican voters were able to think strategically and see past their own prejudices, which we know they can't, they would nominate Nikki Haley. I think that the Koch brothers aren't wrong that strategically,
right,
she would be a choice that would be appealing to a lot of moderate, self-styled moderate, and possibly even like center-left voters. People who are like easily fooled by presentation.
And the Koch brothers did this before. They did it in 2015. They endorsed a bunch of other people other than Trump, and it didn't do any good. So in that vein, too, not entirely clear what this does for her.
Yeah, not sure. Maybe it gives her a little bit of money. I don't know. But there's 7 weeks left before the Iowa Republican caucus, and we'll see what she can do with it. I mean, look, also, if you look back to 2015, 2016, at this point in the like election cycle, if you went back and you were reading like the takes from people talking about who was going to win what and where, none of them actually bore out. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And there's always so much that can happen. There's always so many wild cards that can get thrown in. We just don't know what's going to happen. And anybody that's pretending that they do know what's going to happen doesn't know what they're talking about. That's a really good red flag. Good point. Good red flag. Okay. Oh, we got a toast. Alyssa, take it away.
Rosalynn Carter. She has gone on to the pearly gates of heaven. She and her husband, Jimmy Carter, married for 77 years. All the first ladies showed up for this yesterday, including Melania. The first time I think we've seen her in 150 years.
Yeah.
The best, if you zoom in on the pictures, she was seated next to Michelle Obama.
Who did that?
That Michelle Obama looked serious. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I don't think Michelle Obama likes her.
I'm going to go with no. But in general, it was a lovely, wonderful funeral. Learned so many things through the eulogies about First Lady Carter. One, she did Tai Chi with a sword, Erin. I thought you would especially enjoy that fact. That was some of the exercise that she did.
I learned that from the eulogy that her grandson did. She had a sword and did Tai Chi. That's so cool.
She did. He said most of her recipes had mayo in them, that she did Tai Chi with a sword. She climbed Mount Fuji and Kilimanjaro. She learned how to ski at 60 and did so for about 20 years. She, most importantly, as a post-presidency, was a partner with President Carter and did so much to alleviate disease around the world and address the housing crisis, specifically through their work with Habitat for Humanity. And one thing that I did not know was the Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregivers existed. I did not know what this was. It serves caregivers because she knew you can't care on your own, and it was built on her belief that, quote, there are only 4 kinds of people in this world. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And that got me. I was like, girl, like she and Jimmy Carter really got to the root of a lot of problems and identified them in ways that I think other politicians Never did. She says that when asked how she would like to be remembered, she said, I would like for people to think I took advantage of the opportunities I had. Girl, yes, you did. Rest in peace and power, Rosalynn Carter.
First of all, like I always knew she was a cool lady. I always knew she was a groovy lady, knew about the Equal Rights Amendment. And since her death, I've learned so many amazing things about her. She was like a Renaissance woman.
Totally.
She was ahead of her time. She was just fantastic. And it was also, man, I did not think I would cry watching clips from a funeral of a first lady who was not even like, that was like prior to when I was born. You know, like I didn't really know very much about the Carters growing up, except they were nice people and American voters were pretty unfair to them. But the more I learn about her, she was so cool. She was such a cool person.
Great lady.
And the fact that she was able to drag Melania out of her lair in order to attend this funeral is really something. They were all there. And Jimmy Carter came out of hospice and was there. And also, I wanted to shout out the fact that the two of them worked to eradicate guinea worm.
Yes.
Which is almost, I think Jimmy Carter had a quote that he hoped that he would outlive the last guinea worm. And he's like close. He's close. It's almost been eradicated. And that's partly because of the partnership that he had with his wife. Honestly, like I was reading, there was a part of the funeral where their daughter read a letter that Jimmy had written to her when he was in the Navy. And it was just so sweet and beautiful. And I texted the group that, the Hysteria group, that I don't think Nicholas Sparks has ever written anything this beautiful.
No, it is. They loved each other. Like they loved each other.
They loved each other.
One thing for you and I, Erin, is that one thing that her grandson talked about was at the end of her life, she needed a cane. And she refused to call it a cane. She called it her trekking stick. And I mean, that's what when we have canes, Erin, we're calling them our trekking sticks. That was, till the end, you know, she was on it.
Hell yeah. Toast to Rosalynn Carter. What a great lady. And what a great life.
Great life.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a really fun interview. Stick around. All right. Welcome back. We've had a lot of incredible guests on this show before, but I can count on one hand the number of times I've actually felt starstruck. This is one of those times. Move over, Hillary Clinton. Our guests today have been musical collaborators since 1994. Their music got me through college in my 20s and my 30s. Now Sleater-Kinney is getting ready to release their next album, Little Rope, on January 19th. Carrie Brownstein and Corin Tucker, welcome to Hysteria.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay, so I've been a fan of you guys since my cool older cousin played Call the Doctor for me in the late 90s. In her bedroom, she was giving me French braids in my hair. Treasured memory. So Sleater-Kinney was one of the first bands that I listened to that showed female non-compliance and feminism and feminist topics in a way that felt fresh and not filtered through a patriarchy-approved lens. And you've always been very upfront and open about your politics and your views. Do you see conversations that are happening now in public and think, why are we still talking about this? Didn't we already settle this 25 years ago? And what are those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there are a lot of conversations that are ongoing in this country about, you know, women's role in society, women's bodies and our bodily autonomy. And, you know, the idea of getting paid equally for equal work. I mean, those conversations are still ongoing, and it is really frustrating, you know, when you're young and you think like, I'm going to write it, you know, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in and I'm going to help things change, you know, and you realize that the process of change is so much slower and less linear than you thought when you were younger. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth fighting for what we think is important. You know, it doesn't mean that we should give up struggling for, for women to have equal position in society. It's just that, that struggle is ongoing. It's been going on for a long time, and I think it will continue for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know how many of us in like the post Roe v. Wade generation expected that to be like rolled back. There's just these cycles of backlash that I think we have amnesia about, with every moment, era, decade of progress in our country, there is a concurrent reaction, and people who feel threatened by social progress and an increase in rights by people who formerly may not have had the same rights. And, the backlash is very strong and has both a literal but also a figurative violence to it. It encroaches on the psyche, and, you see it connected, whether it's misogyny or misogynoir or trans misogyny. Like, it's just all these like interconnected things where people just are so threatened by whether it's, women of color, poor women, but, like trans women, like the ways that society doesn't conform to the promise for certain people anymore is really scary. And they are coming at these rights as sort of the last gasp. And it is wild. I think we're sold this idea, to Corin's point, that progress is inevitable, that it just kind of marches onward. And clearly it doesn't. And so, yeah, it's hard to revisit those conversations. I think the good thing about getting to revisit conversations or realizing it's an ongoing conversation is we can have a more sophisticated conversation. We can make up for the ways that the first conversation was too reductive or lacked inclusion, or lacked intersectionality. So like, good, we get to still talk about abortion, but now let's talk about it in a way where the first couple times we were acknowledging disparities between the rates of, healthcare, we get to acknowledge the complexity of it. So hopefully we do make real progress. That's the kind of hope I have to take from it.
You two have been collaborating for so long. And with any long-running collaboration or relationship, eventually you sort of reach a point where you're so in sync, you can kind of guess how the other person is going to react to most things. When's the last time you were truly surprised by each other?
Wow, you really stumped us. Most people approach that question so differently, like asking us to describe all the ways that we are in sync. But I mean, I think there were moments on this album where Corin surprised me in terms of, like, we ended up having to approach it so differently on this record. And I think compared to the last couple albums, she did approach the singing quite differently. And I was like surprised and in awe and very admiring of her like work and restraint and vocal sort of control and mastery in the studio. That was very surprising. But I'll say the other thing that surprised me about Corin is how impatient she is about wanting to finish the record. I was like, wait a second. I always feel like I'm the one that's usually impatient, but Corin was like itching to get it done. That was a little surprising to me, in some ways.
Yeah, I think that there were surprises on this album for both of us. And I think that, yeah, it's funny because sometimes Carrie is the more impatient person in some ways, but she is much more patient and super dedicated in terms of writing and rewriting songs and editing things, and she can just kind of really stick with things. Whereas I was just like, this song is done. I'm sure it's done. I just kind of hit a point where I need to like walk away, and she really likes to sit with things. So I think that's a way that's kind of surprising about us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the star of your newest music video, Say It Like You Mean It, is J. Smith Cameron. We are huge fans of hers over here. She's been on our pod a couple times. What led to you casting her in this music video? And Carrie, what was it like working with her as the director of the video?
Well, I'm a big fan of Succession and love what Jay has brought to the character of Jerry. She's just become this iconic character. And I love watching Jay kind of have this like later in career sort of renaissance, like so deserving. She's, been an actress in both theater, film, and television for decades, and she's stellar. And so we reached out to her, not through official channels. I would not call the DM an official channel, but you got to take your shot sometimes. And she said yes. And yeah, she was just so game. I think people in the music industry take the idea, the conceit, the concept of music videos for granted. It is just this vernacular that we all really understand. There's something sort of absurd about it. Why is someone singing? Well, they're singing because it's a music video. But for an actress who's coming from, disciplines where she needs more information, what are the motivations? What is this backstory? And I really felt lucky to work with someone who was willing to see this as basically a short film. And she needed to find a way into the song, into the performance, to justify essentially and understand what the stakes were and what every moment she was bringing to the song meant. So that was part of the process, was a lot of back and forth, first via text and telephone. And then, she was so kind to want to come to Portland. She lives in New York. She was eager to come out here. And yeah, she was a real joy to work with. Just such a consummate actor. She was vulnerable and honest with the things that were making her a little nervous about, a music video. She just kept saying, well, when are you guys in the music video? And I said, well, we're not in the video. This is you. This is you in the video. But yeah, she's lovely. And, yeah, we're just really, grateful that she took that risk with us and gave a really honest and beautiful performance for a song that means a lot to us on this record. So it was really a perfect confluence of things.
Mm-hmm. And it is a really beautiful video, and her performance is stunning and un-Jerry-like. She's a different character. She's so talented, and the end result is really great. You've said that the forthcoming album, Little Rope, grapples with grief and personal tragedy. Grief to me seems like the emotion that is least conducive to creativity. So how do you arm wrestle the heaviness of grief into something creative and cathartic?
I think that, sometimes just committing to the work of being creative and pushing yourself into writing material can get you through a lot of different experiences. If you just make yourself work every day and give yourself the time to say, like, we have to finish these set of songs, that structure and that discipline is really like what can guide you through things, no matter what you might be experiencing. That idea of a work ethic when you're writing songs, I think can be like a guiding light through what might be a really difficult experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Well, I think the album does grapple with grief and loss, but much of it was written before I lost my mom and stepdad. And so, the idea of grappling, it's almost not sort of wrestling with, literal grief, but in ways like how does a partnership, how does the rest of your life conform to the aftermath? How does the relationship to work and friendship and love and perspective change? And so a lot of the album was kind of pulled into this very murky, confounding space. And the songs became the thing with clarity, while the rest of my life felt very incoherent and inchoate and confusing. The songs had a shape that I felt like I didn't have in that moment. So much about grief feels like a deconstruction of self and structures and family and personhood. It's just such a existential dread, but music has a perennial living, breathing quality to it. So I think we transferred some of that mystery, some of that horror into a part of our lives that we knew could pull us out of that. We didn't feel compelled or like we had to finish the album, but it just became the context through which I was able to process things. And, I obviously needed Corin to step up, and she does sing more, and, it shaped that process. But the songs themselves, there are moments of disparity and darkness, but there's a lot of, things that are more celebratory and joyful. It's not just a dark, depressing album at all. It sort of is taking all those dualities, kind of sitting in the in-between a lot.
How are you feeling about the current state of American politics, and are you worried about 2024? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, of course, I think it's just a very nerve-wracking time in American politics and global politics as well. I think it's really difficult to feel hope about things in a system that I feel like is so, it's got so many flaws in it, the American political system. However, I still think that, the most important thing we have is our democracy, is like the idea that everyone should be able to make a choice and vote on our decisions as a country. I think our system is very flawed. I don't think that everyone has a totally equal shot at voting. Unfortunately, I think that's become one thing that we're fighting over again. But I still think that, the idea that we're making as a country decisions and that we're working towards, a really true democracy that's extremely important, even though despite, what feels like the lack of real choices sometimes in terms of political parties.
Yeah. I mean, I can almost echo Corin's hope, but I feel very nervous about the 2024 election. I think Biden sort of ran on the idea that he'd be a one-term president, and now we're left with no other viable candidates. No one in the Democratic Party is stepping up. It feels like everyone's just been given this like rule book, like let's let's put all these ambitions on pause and give Biden his second term, which is very precarious. There's polling that shows, and again, I don't necessarily trust polling. It's been off for many, many years, but polling that indicates that Trump would beat Biden in a general election in a lot of like key states. You have Trump like trouncing his Republican competitors. Like that to me, and the language that Trump uses, I don't know if we are ready for really the kind of autocracy that he is suggesting, that he is intimating through his language of like casting his political enemies as vermin. Like this is the kind of rhetorical strategy he uses. And this is the kind of rhetorical strategy that will continue to foment violence, like actual violence and insurrection, and be like hasten the demise of a democracy that's already very fragile. On both sides, there's so much distrust in our systems. I think that Democrats inherently have more of a sense of let's rebuild, and the more extreme Republicans, like the Christian right wing folks, like they're more ready to destroy, not rebuild. Like there's that. So anyway, that to me leaves less hope. I just don't know where, if our trust in institutions is so eroded, and the younger people get, the more they mistrust institutions. Like, I just don't know where we rebuild from the inside, but it's not like someone's come in with some other great plan, and anarchy is anarchy. Like there's nothing on the other side of it if we don't have like a better idea. Democracy is the best idea so far, but can we build it in the image of and maintain it in the image of the people it's there to protect? So who knows? It's a wild ride, and I don't take lightly like how like enervating and damaging it is to exist inside of this like total whirlwind. And that's just America. That's just our country. Like it's hard not to sort of just, no wonder people just spend a lot of time on TikTok.
Although politics is kind of hard to escape on TikTok too. I mean, if you have my algorithm, it's a lot of people that are like, did you read the whole article that you're telling me about, or no? Okay. So Riot Girl, which, the movement from Olympia, the West Coast from back in the 90s, was a very heavily political movement. What do you see the role of music in politics being going into this, like, this next existential election? And if you guys are touring to support Little Rope, do you plan on talking about politics while you're touring?
I think that it's important to consider the platform that you have as a performer, as a public person. And I do think that it's important to speak out about things. That's just kind of who I am as a person, and what I think this band has always been, a part of is it's like commenting on society, and therefore commenting on the politics of our society. It's part of our vernacular, I think, as a band, and I think as people, and so, I think that we do think about it, and we also realize that we have a limited role to play, that we don't necessarily think like we're going to have a huge effect on world politics. You know what I mean? I think that it's important to think about, well, what can we do that's important as a band? And I think one thing that we have done is we've registered people to vote at our shows through an organization called Headcount. I think that's a really positive way to impact people's role in democracy, is encouraging people. It is important to vote. Here's a way to sign up if you haven't before. So that we are taking a look at our own, status as maybe public people and doing something that can make a positive impact.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's great about shows is that they're in specific towns and cities and locations. And those are the places where I think people can make a difference. The farther you zoom out, the more unlikely it feels to be able to make a change with your vote or your words. But the closer you zoom in to your city and county and state elections, the more you do see things affecting the population, whether it's, a state like Ohio deciding like, no, we will not write an abortion ban into the Constitution, like those kind of things like that. So I think when you're traveling city to city, one of the joys, I think, of just being on tour is meeting people where they are, both literally, but also sort of psychologically, emotionally. That's the beauty of live music. So bringing people together at a time where things can feel very splintered, things can feel very alienating, where outrage is so encouraged online, but in person, there is just, I think, a tendency more towards compassion and understanding and nuance. And our role is both to, foster that connection, but also to make good music so that what we're contributing to the world is a way for people to feel seen, to feel heard, to provide a soundtrack to a moment that could be private or public or political. Like, I think we always return to that as our facet of resistance, is to keep making good records, because that is what is the first line of connection we have with other people, for sure. So we think of that first, and then because of who we are, of course, we want to, have it be augmented by maybe specific political organizations. But our job is to write music that can soundtrack a resistance, even if that resistance is small and someone deciding to get out of bed instead of not getting out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carrie Brownstein and Corin Tucker, thank you so much for joining me today and for the conversation. And listeners, Little Rope, January 19th. Get it wherever you get music. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Erin.